Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 92 of the Hammer Territory podcast. I'm your host, Brad Rowland, coming to you deep into the night here on a Monday into Tuesday. It is not October as we're recording this, but it'll be October as you're listening to it. And I'm joined by Scott Coleman. Scott, it has been quite a day. Our colleagues recorded a podcast already that should be in this same podcast feed, doing more of a rapid reaction to the madness that happened. The Braves and Padres are going to play a playoff series that begins in only a few hours. How are you? How are you holding up?
Hey, Brad. I am exhausted. Like mentally, I'm a little drained. It was high stress baseball today. And man, I mean, there are so many things probably running through my head right now that we are going to talk about on this show. At the risk of just blabbering for like 10 minutes, we'll try to break it down for so people can maybe digest everything that we have to talk about tonight. But it was, at the end of the day, the Atlanta Braves somehow, some way, have made the playoffs despite everything that has gone wrong for this team since day one, pretty much. And that's a lot. And that's a true testament to this team. I don't think anybody would have necessarily blamed them for just kind of saying, you know what, this just isn't our year. Half the team is hurt. Our two best players arguably are out for the season. Now three best players are arguably out. Maybe four best players are out for the season. And here they are. Now you have a chance to see what happens in October.
Yeah, the Braves are making their seventh straight trip to the playoffs. They didn't win the division this time, but they've been in the postseason now 7 consecutive seasons. We should say at the top of the podcast, if you're a new listener or a recurring listener, we are Hammer Territory. We are part of the Foul Territory network of podcasts. Please, please, please go ahead and subscribe to the show anywhere you listen to podcasts or watch podcasts. We are also on YouTube. You can see Scott and I in shining HD fashion. And I plugged it already, but we will Scott and I will try to be brief about Monday in particular because, in part, Steven and Sean, our colleagues, did a full wrap-up show focused heavily on that. But we should at least begin with that. We'll attempt to be concise before we kind of preview. Our main task on this part 2, basically, is to preview the series coming up against San Diego in a very fast turnaround. But we alluded to it, Scott. I mean, I won't give away what you wrote in our document, but it seems like we are in agreement about just how absolutely nuts Monday was, from game 1 being just in itself crazy, and then all of the dynamics in play for game 2. How much the Mets tried in game 2 is up for debate on some level. But I mean, you teased it, but I mean, what else is there to say about Monday? And of course, just for the sickos, we will talk about Ozzy Albies because that was the funniest thing imaginable. And now we can laugh. And if the Braves had lost, it would not have been so funny. Now it's back to being funny.
Yeah. I did genuinely laugh my ass off for 5 minutes after
Agreed.
Ozzy Albies said, "In your face, Brad and Scott." That was great. A lot of people reached out. That was even better. But yeah, I mean, that was as far as regular season baseball games go. And I know today was technically like a playoff game, but it was still the regular season in the record books. That was probably the craziest regular season baseball game that I have ever watched, especially when you consider the circumstance and what was at stake. I mean, game 1 was just nuts honestly, the first 6 innings were pretty breezy and maybe not super high drama and stress. And then the last 3 innings, I mean, dear God, what a roller coaster that was. But it's funny that we just sat through 18 innings of this crazy stress baseball. And at the end of the day, if the Braves and Mets would have just shook hands virtually on a conference call and said, let's each win 1 game and we'll forfeit the other, it's the exact same outcome as the grueling day they just put together on the field. But I guess that is part of why you play the game. You get moments like today, and it was certainly not for the weak of heart for all of the chaos, especially in game 1.
Yeah, I know a lot of Mets fans. They had fun today, which saddens me. I don't enjoy when they have fun, even though they're my friends. I don't want them to have fun. But we won't relitigate it because Steven and Sean did that already. But obviously, game 1 was just preposterous in every way. The blown lead, the recovery, the second blown lead, all the things that happened. On the Ozzy front, and people won't fully grasp this unless they listen to our show. You and I did a show Sunday night, our traditional time slot, kind of previewing, setting the table for Monday. And we talked heavily about Ozzy Albies and how he'd been struggling really badly since he came back. not switching anymore, all those things. Batting second, the one thing we definitely agreed on was that he shouldn't bat second against a righty. And, lo and behold, he bats second against a righty. We made fun of this. We even said it on the show, I think at least twice. It was like we were calling our shot. Like, after all this, Ozzy's definitely going to have a homer in this game, right?
Yep.
And not only did he have a homer, he had like just an insane game. I can't remember who gave the stat to me, so I apologize. Somebody on Twitter, I should have written it down. But here's my favorite one, and I'll let you react to this. Ozzy's played more than 900 career games as a major leaguer, including the playoffs. 900 games. Game 1 today was the second time in his entire career that he hit a home run and walked multiple times in the same game.
Yep.
2 out of 900. Scott, and we pretty much called it last night. And then that's before you get into his, he played good defense today, which is the one thing that we were like in agreement he wasn't going to be able to do. It was just perfect. I love Ozzy, so it made it even more fun, but I was truly dying. It was so funny. We were all reacting in real time. And you mentioned it, but people were reaching out to us immediately. And I love that kind of interaction stuff where we know people are listening. Cause you and I are just talking. We know people are going to listen to the podcast. We see the numbers and things, but it's just different to have that people are really paying attention to the podcast when it was like an immediate deluge in our mentions tagging both of us and all that stuff. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, look, man, longtime listeners know we are huge Ozzy Albies fans, but we also like to keep it real on the show and call things out for what they are. And the fact was, coming into today, since coming off the injured list, Ozzy had really struggled. And we talked about it for maybe 10 minutes on Sunday night. And lo and behold, he has a game, as you just said, for the second time in his very long career, did he do something, again, very on brand for the show's history. Would love for Ozzy to stick it to us, stick it to the pod, and have a great month of October. He already had a great day today. And if he can get hot, I mean, that means the world to this team, because as we talked about for 10 minutes last night, he is going to have a million opportunities to drive in runs, especially batting second. And what did he do today in game 1? But I think he had 6 RBI or something crazy, maybe 5. It goes to show the importance of Ozzy Albies in the team, especially if he's batting second. And if today was just a sign of things to come, it really did seem like it was maybe it was his best moment and best game without any shadow of a doubt, not only since the broken wrist, but really on the season as a whole.
Yeah, and it was. I wish we could have celebrated it in the game 1 win versus having to stick out game 2. But certainly that was a fun moment in retrospect. Game 2 was fortunately largely uneventful. What happened between game 1 and game 2 was eventful. As we'll kind of preview, we're going to get into this a lot deeper later on in the podcast. But the Chris Sale bomb that drops, that because of the logistics, Alex Anthopoulos gives a press conference between game 1 and game 2, which would never happen. And he even said that. Usually this would be Snit. There was no way. But because Snit had to prepare his team to play in 40 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever it was, you got Alex up there answering questions between games. And he's like, by the way, Chris Sale can't pitch today. And yeah, so we'll come back to that as far as what's going to happen now. But that obviously, we will talk about the betting market a ton, but the Braves were minus 500 favorites, which is massive if you follow betting spreads when Sale was going to pitch, because everybody knew the deal. The Mets are going to have to try. The Braves have Sale. And as soon as Sale is out, everybody, and I know this includes me, I'm assuming it includes you, is like, oh my God, they're really going to do this. They're really going to lose this game against a team that's not trying. Shouts to Grant Holmes. That's the last thing we have to talk about Monday. Grant Holmes, who pitched the day before, and that drove me nuts. And by the way, did you catch this? Alex said in his press conference, his mini press conference, that there was no way they would have thrown Grant Holmes yesterday had they known that Chris Sale was going to pitch. Not going to pitch, because Grant Holmes was obviously the long man / bolt guy. And the last thing you want, and this is something that people were yelling at me yesterday, this is one, I'm not saying that I foresaw Chris Sale having back spasms. I had no idea about that. But one of the reasons I wanted Grant Holmes to not pitch yesterday was in case of something crazy on Monday. And lo and behold, he still threw 4 innings and he was awesome. So shouts to Grant Holmes.
Yeah, man. Grant Holmes, for a player who I think rightfully has gotten a lot of credit for what he has given this team this season. I mean, what a cool moment for him.
Yeah.
A player who was a first-round pick, but then spent a decade in the minor leagues. I'm sure there was a lot of moments where Grant, laying in bed in some small-town hotel, was thinking, is it time? Right? I still haven't made the majors. Is it time to move on to something else? And he stuck with it. and he's thrown some huge innings for the team this year. And especially on a day where the Braves suddenly did not have the Cy Young winner, man, I mean, you talk about a player who needed to step up. And I know the Mets were maybe not trying, but it was pretty clear. I mean, there was the one play from Brandon Nimmo on a double play ball. Let me say this. If it was a game that mattered, something tells me Brandon Nimmo would have beaten out the double play. But because clearly the Mets literally must have had like their bags packed, ready to hop on the team bus to go to the airport, as they should, and nothing really changed in their view. For many reasons, the Braves were kind of playing a team that was drawing dead in game 2. And hey, Grant Holmes, credit to him. He went out there, he threw strikes, he was efficient, and really ran into no trouble until the 5th inning where he seemed to run out of gas a little bit.
Yeah, and we won't again break down the whole game, but it was not comfortable. Even though we understood the Braves had the advantage against a team that wasn't necessarily trying. It was 3-0 again, which is the scary score from the previous game. Like, it was not comfortable at all. But in the end, look, we started here. We'll end this segment here. The Braves got into the playoffs, and every time we talked about this, whether it was us or Steven or Sean, the last couple weeks, it's all about getting in. And there's all these competing dynamics,
right,
especially the last few days with the pitching stuff and who's going to go when and being ready for the wild card series. But Alex said it today too, very plainly, like nothing mattered after today unless they got in the playoffs. And they got in the playoffs. It took them all the way to the very end. It was shenanigans all the way through, but they got in, and new season begins on Tuesday, I guess.
I know that people don't love it when they hear it, but it is so true. Just get into the playoffs and see what happens. Truly. I mean, again, I always bring up the Diamondbacks from last year. The Diamondbacks were miserable down the stretch last season. They were awful. They couldn't score runs. The bullpen was crumbling. And what do? But they sneak into the postseason on, I believe, what was game 161 for them. And all of a sudden, you blinked, and they were in the World Series. And I'm not necessarily predicting that or projecting it for the Braves, but you cannot win a World Series if you don't get in. And at the end of the day, the Braves now have at least a fighting chance against a good Padres club. If they advance, it would be against the Dodgers, and then who knows who they would face beyond that. But they at least have a chance. And even if I think at the end of the day, we all want a World Series, getting into the playoffs is a huge accomplishment for this team. And now we're going to have to see how the next couple of days and maybe even weeks go.
We are on the same page there. And in a second, we're going to talk about a lot of different angles for the coming series. It's a 3-gamer, the Braves and the Padres. It begins on Tuesday. We'll touch on all of that and more in a second. But first, a word from our friends at Foul Territory.
We get it. Mornings are nuts. No time for breakfast, but you need to get your day started right.
What if a delicious, nutritious meal could be ready in seconds? Support for Foul Territory is brought to you by Huel, the world's #1 complete nutrition brand. With over 400 million meals sold worldwide, Huel is trusted by millions of people looking to fuel their days with convenient, complete nutrition. Try it for yourself with this exclusive FT offer. 15% off with the code FOUL at Huel.com.
You know we're all about saving time, but we get hangry, like a lot. I recently fell in love with the Huel Ultimate Super Greens Powder, which is a perfect blend of 91 vitamins, minerals, and whole food sourced ingredients. I also love their complete nutrition bars, and those hot and savory pouches are fire too.
FT fam, give it a shot. Get 15% off with the code FOUL at HUEL.com. Unlock a healthier, easier way to eat with Huel. Nutritionally complete meals in minutes so you can focus on what really matters.
Okay, Scott, I'm going to throw you a curveball right out of the gate here because we got a question as we were talking on Twitter. And it has to do with the infamous discussion from the last couple of years about the rest versus rust debate. And I figured we should just talk about it now. It's a good kind of bridge into talk about the specifics of the series. Because, look, we talked about this last year. If people are new listeners, you of course want the bye. There was a silly discussion about whether you want to keep playing or advance to the NLDS, and I think it's pretty clear you want to have the bye, and everyone in baseball would agree on that. But you want to talk about the lack of rest. This is as close as it possibly could be. As we're talking late night Monday into Tuesday, the Braves are in the air right now, flying to San Diego for a game that's going to be happening tomorrow. So how do you feel about this? Is there any possibility that you could just kind of catch – look, and all this stuff's narrative-y, so I'll just say that out front. But I mean, just vibes wise, after all this, is there any sort of catch fire aspect? Because you teased it with the D-backs. There isn't a lot, and this is one of Steven's hobby horses too. There's not a lot of data that says the way you finish the season really impacts the way you play in the playoffs. In fact, it kind of says the opposite. So maybe that's a good thing the Braves didn't play their. I mean, they were playing really well, to be fair, before today. But no rest. Is that just better? Change it up, and we'll see.
Can I get back to you in like 72 hours? And
yeah,
I can tell
ask me again on Thursday. Right, exactly.
Definitively, I can tell you the answer to your question. I think a lot of it is narrative driven. Is there a science behind it? Probably not. You look at the Braves and even the Dodgers, and they had great regular seasons the past couple of years. They had 4 or 5 days off, and they came out flat, and they lost. And then you look at a team on the other hand, like the Houston Astros, who before this year have had, I believe, the first round bye every year since the playoffs expanded. And the Astros have just dog walked their opponents for the most part. They won a World Series a couple of years ago, and they went to Game 7 of the ALCS against the Rangers and probably should have won the series. So, the fact is we don't know. I think in general, I would always rather have the first round bye because you have a 100% chance of advancing to the NLDS. Braves do not have that opportunity this year. But if they happen to go on a run now, who knows? Maybe I'll feel differently in 72 hours if they just come out guns blazing this week.
There is, I understand, but there is no way that I will ever reverse my course on one in the bye versus not one in the bye. The thing that you maybe could argue is the not wanting to have the long layoff. As far as like, okay, if you were, for instance, talk about the Padres a little bit. The Padres have known for a few days that they were going to be in this position as the number one wild card team. They kind of clinched that. They could set their pitching staff. That's where you had the debate about like pedal to the metal all the way to the end or pedal off and set up your pitching. And these are two teams who are diametrically opposed in that because the Braves have about as little rotation stability as a team could possibly have going into the playoffs, as we'll talk about in a second. Whereas the Padres have lined up the way that they wanted to line it up. Now, there's some controversy there too. They did not pitch their best. Well, they announced that they're not going to throw their best pitcher, Dylan Cease, in game 1, which is kind of a surprise. But they had that choice. That was their call on that. The Braves are not choosing anything at this point. It's just piece it together, basically. So I wanted to leave with that. But look, I know we have a lot of listeners that kind of only watch the Braves. And that's not a criticism. It's just what it is. The Padres have been playing incredibly well. And that's part of this discussion is going to be kind of just what are the Padres as we prepare for Tuesday. And it's not an exaggeration by winning percentage that they have been the best team in baseball since the All-Star break. Now, granted, that's an arbitrary endpoint. The full season matters, but they were pretty middling before the All-Star break, and they've been, again, not kidding, the best team in baseball, better than the Dodgers, better than the Yankees. Pick your team. They've been the best team in baseball since the break, and this is a real scary opponent. It's not the Dodgers like that we all, that famous showdown where it's Braves-Dodgers and we all went over. The Padres are really good, though, and they should not be taken lightly by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, I think the great Tim Kirkjian of ESPN, very, very long time baseball writer, was talking that this might be the most open and balanced and even, at least going into the playoffs, that he can recall. And I'm inclined to agree. I mean, if you tell me a month from now that the Padres are the World Series champions, I would believe it.
Agreed.
They are 43-19 since the All-Star break. So they started the year 50-50. So exactly 500 after 100 games. And then 43-19 the rest of the way. And they did it in a good division in the NL West. They are good offensively. They are good in the pitching staff. They have a solid bullpen. They play pretty good defense. They have a great home field. I know a lot of Braves fans may not catch a ton of games at Petco Park, but the Padres in San Diego, it is a fantastic baseball town. So that stadium is going to be jacked up on Tuesday night and really throughout the week. So it is a real challenge for the Braves. If you would have asked me to pick, I probably would have taken the Milwaukee Brewers instead of San Diego. But, it is what it is. You have to play the team in front of you. And in my mind, is there a chance that the Braves win the series? Yes, absolutely. Let me ask you this, Brad. what percent chance do you give the Braves to win the series, knowing everything we know right now, which is not everything because we still don't know who's starting game one. But if I were to say, Brad Rowland, your official prediction, what percent chance do you give the Braves of winning the series? And again, your analyst hat and not your fan hat.
Yeah.
What would you put it at?
Well, why people know this that listen to the show regularly, my analyst hat goes to what's the betting market say? Not that that's always perfect, but it's a good indicator usually. And right now, the implied odds, so basically the Padres are favored in the series, which makes total sense. I know Braves fans don't want to hear that, but it's a 3-game series entirely in San Diego, and the Padres are well rested, and they had their 3 stars that they have picked. But still, I say all that, and the implied odds in the series are like 35 or 40% for the Braves. So that feels right to me, even with a game 1 potential chaos situation that we'll talk about more in depth in a second. Yeah, I mean, it's a 3-game series in baseball. I mean, we've done this bit for years, but the best team in baseball in a 3-game series against the worst team in baseball is like 80-20 to win it. It's not like it's not basketball where there's like a 30-point gap between these two teams.
Yep.
Maybe the White Sox this year are an outlier, but the Braves lost to the White Sox this year with Chris Sale on the mound. That happened. It's baseball. Baseball's crazy. So, yeah, I think, objectively speaking, I think I'd probably go with like 40%. And that might sound too low to you. That might sound too high to you if you want to view it through the most negative lens possible. But I think my baseline in playoff series, if the teams are relatively similar, is coin flippy with one side taking a little bit of a lead. And in a short series, that's even more the case. The only reason why it's not 50-50 for me is because of the pitching situation and the games are in San Diego. Like with this new format, the Braves have not been in the series yet with a 3-gamer like this, as far as like in the new format. I know there was the COVID season and weirdness there, but it all being in the same park is strange. No day off in between. All this stuff all these factors are limiting. So I'm rambling, but I think 40%, something like that sounds right to me. And I'm not trying to be pessimistic because look, we're going to be hopefully rooting through a positive situation this week, but that feels reasonable and also not pessimistic given all the things that are going against the Braves.
Yeah. I mean, I think people who have sat through 162 Braves games this season, I mean, maybe there are some fans who would come on and go, no, the Braves have a 99% chance of winning or 100% chance.
You know how this is though. Like there's always the crowd that's like, you can't pick against the Braves. You guys are not real fans. There's that crowd. And then there's the other crowd that's like, it's 1%. And I get it on both sides right now. I understand, especially the pessimistic crowd. I always lean that way personally. That's what my brain works. But take 3 steps back. Yeah, you could certainly argue the Padres are the favorites. The market agrees. I don't think anybody's going to be picking the Braves that's like trying to be like safe in their projections. But in baseball, that still means 40%. It's just what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with all of that. And I mean, are the Braves, does it feel like they are underdogs going in? Yes, I think so. They have to travel. Yeah. They don't have their pitching lined up at all. Again, we should say we don't believe that Chris Sale is going to be able to pitch in the series.
That's a big domino.
Spencer Schwellenbach is not going to be able to pitch in the series. Maybe now we'll start talking about the Braves' pitching plans a little bit, Brad, but no Sale not for sure. It seems, we don't
know. Not for sure. Yeah, give the timestamp. It's 10 p.m. Eastern on Monday as we're talking. The Braves are on the plane. So we're in this dead zone right now. The only thing that's been said on the record is Brian Snitker basically telling the media that he doesn't believe Sale's going to be available. He's definitely out, but there was even talk about the potential that he might stay in Atlanta to obviously the worst thing you could possibly do for back spasms is get on a plane. I know it's private travel, but still. And if they think that he can't pitch in the series or probably can't pitch in the series, you could argue keeping him in Atlanta, having him be cared for the potential of the NLDS would make some sense. But given all that, I think we have to assume he's out, even acknowledging that there is a chance he's not. But is that a 10% chance? I don't know. I'm not going to put a number on it, but for the rest of this conversation, I think we probably should just assume he's not pitching.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I mean, not only did Brian Snitker say it, but there has been no reporting on leaving the door open even. I mean, it feels like most people are operating with the idea that the Braves will not have Sale this week. And that's how we're going to have the conversation. And hey, if it comes out tomorrow morning that Chris Sale's back feels 100% and he's starting game one, awesome.
Great.
Amazing. We'll jump up and down. If you're watching this midday on, Tuesday, you can skip the next 5 minutes. But yeah, it doesn't seem likely they're going to have Sale. They will not have Schwallenbach. I guess he could pitch out of the bullpen for an inning or two on Wednesday or Thursday. But game one, very much in the air. Presumably, Max Fried is lined up for a regular start in game two. And then game three is also very much in the air if they get there. So many, many moving pieces now compared to San Diego, which has basically locked in their pitching staff for days now at this point.
So let's just take a practical approach. Let's talk about game one first in some respects. And honestly, all this kind of folds in on each other because there are roster considerations that kind of lay on top of this. And a lot of them have to do with game one in particular, because the reality is that barring Chris Sale and a miracle, the Braves do not have a starting pitcher on full rest to deploy on Tuesday, unless they go to the minor leagues and grab one of the four guys that have been listed by beat writers as options. And those four guys are, just for, play the Benny Hill music, Ian Anderson, AJ Smith-Shawver, Bryce Elder, and Hurston Waldrop. Three of the four of them have pitched in the majors this year. Ian has not pitched in the major leagues since, drumroll, August 13th, 2022. So the craziest possible scenario is Ian Anderson pitching in the playoffs after not pitching in the majors for 2 years. That could happen. That's where we are, Scott. So we don't know the plan. There is a roster scenario that we should at least mention out loud, and that the Braves have been carrying 28 players for a month because September is expanded rosters. Even if they had Chris Sale and everything was normal, they have to pare down to 26. It goes back to 26 starting tomorrow. And only 13 of those guys can be pitchers. So there's that consideration. Do you if Sale, they have to decide if Sale's going to be on the roster at all by tomorrow. That's part of the question too. Is like, it's not like, oh, maybe he could pitch in game on Thursday. If he's not traveling or pitching, he's not going to be on the roster. That's one spot. Do you carry, I'm just going to ask a bunch of questions that we're going to answer. Do you carry Charlie Morton, knowing that he's not going to be able to pitch a full regular start in the series? Schwellenbach, I think you're going to carry because they could use him in the bullpen, and he's been so good, all those things. You got to rain out, he'll that kind of thing. But there are bullpen decisions to make. Grant Holmes, God bless him, he pitched 4 innings today. He can't pitch tomorrow. There's no chance he's pitching tomorrow. Do you carry Grant Holmes? I think they probably do, but just saying that out loud. All that stuff comes in, but the big thing, I guess, is just what's the plan for game one? And okay, let's just cross one thing off first, right? I guess we shouldn't cross it off, but I don't know about you. My mentions have been full of people insisting that Max Fried can pitch on 3 days rest on Tuesday. My reaction is twofold, right? Number one, we've been following this for a long time. We've been following Max for a long time. The Braves do not like to pitch Max Fried even on regular rest sometimes. They like to give Max an extra day sometimes. Not a ton of extra days, but like not a guy they want to push. He'll be a free agent at the end of the year. Probably a consideration if you're Max. And number two, which is I think even more important than that, because I get that there's this thought that like it's the playoffs, rubs dirt on it, pitch. I get it. Number two is that doesn't solve your problem, because if you pitched on 3 days rest on Tuesday, you have the same problem on Wednesday. You don't have anybody to pitch Wednesday either. And on Wednesday, Ronaldo Lopez was your starting pitcher the day after Max Fried. He pitched in relief today and spent 2.5 weeks on the IL with a shoulder. I can guarantee you he's not starting on 3 days rest. Well, actually, it'd be 2 days rest after he pitched today, or 1 day rest, or whatever it would be. So, like, no matter what, even if you were just the toughest guy in the world and you think Max Fried just has to go out there in 3 days rest and tough it out, your problem is still there in game two. So and also last thing, I'm sorry for rambling, Scott. There is no indication or reporting that they've even considered Max Fried. No one has mentioned the words Max Fried for Tuesday. 0. So just want to get that out there. It's not happening. I don't think. I would be shocked.
Me too. I don't think it's an option, especially because it doesn't solve any problem. It fixes a problem one day, but then you have the exact same problem the next. So, no, I think they will pitch Max Fried in game two Again, This is the best of 3. So you can almost argue that game 2, game 2 is just as important as game 1 in a best of 3.
They're all in the same venue. Like, there's no travel. Like, it's not like you have a game 3 at home waiting for you, or game 1 at home. Like, they're all in the same place. Like, they all mean the same. They just, obviously you want to get to game 3 by the end if you want to, but I agree.
Yeah. So it doesn't really solve any problem by pitching Max. And then, as we know, as we presume, no Sale. We presume no Schmallenbach for sure. Charlie Morton pitched Sunday. He's not an option. Ronaldo pitched Saturday, and as you just laid out, is not really an option for game 1.
As a starter, anyway. Like, he could be in the bullpen like he was today. Like, there is a world, like, for instance, using today as an example with Ronaldo, they can, and this happens a lot in the playoffs, you can throw a starter on their throw day as a reliever. Today was Ronaldo's throw day, so he threw 15 pitches, something like that today.
Yeah.
Maybe they would try that with Charlie. Maybe they would try that with Schwellenbach. But, like, that might be an inning or 2. Like, that they're not starting on 2 days rest or 1 day rest. That's just like it's a little bit of a twinkle in your eye kind of thing. Ronaldo's been a reliever many times before, so he's used to doing that. That doesn't fix your problem either.
No. So I think, based on kind of folks around the team, and it makes sense, the Braves are going to have to call upon one of the AAA arms, presumably Ian Anderson or AJ Smith-Shawver. I don't think they're going to do Bryce Elder. Oh my God. Man. If I have to do a podcast on another Bryce Elder postseason start, it's going to be like a 7-minute show.
Well, we could try the reverse jinx. We could try to use our Ozzy Albies powers on Bryce Elder for tomorrow and just be like, oh man, don't give me Bryce Elder, and he'll throw 5 scoreless innings. But no, I think we're on the same page. I don't know. And by the way, no one on the beat that I have seen has really given a guess. They're all just listing the names. And I understand why. I don't have a guess either. People were asking me what I would do. And honestly, I feel like people that cover Gwinnett have more of an idea how these guys look than I do. I won't tell you that I really know how these guys have been pitching that well in the last couple of months. I know that Ian didn't have a really great year in Gwinnett. The numbers were not great. I know AJ Smith-Shawver is a higher upside guy who we all kind of like, but he's been gone for a while from my view. We always admit this. I don't watch a lot of Gwinnett. So I don't often just like defer to what the team says, but I have to believe that they have their guy that they like out of this cohort. And even if those guys don't start, like, because look, do you agree with this? My thought is game 1 is a bullpen game no matter what.
Yeah.
Even if they bring up a starter from a quote unquote starter from AAA, that guy's not going to be in a traditional starting role unless he's just like throwing a no-hitter. The first sign of trouble, they're not going to keep going with Bryce Elder into the 5th inning if he's going to 3 runs. Like, it's not going to be a traditional. So that, to me, it's a bullpen game, but you want to have someone who can throw some bulk on the roster, basically.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. I think it's you call up a starter, and Rick Kranitz has his hand on the bullpen phone whenever there's the first sign of trouble. Looking at it today, Raisel Iglesias pitched both games. Joe Jimenez pitched both games. The one pitcher,
4 innings.
Yeah, right. No Grant Holmes. I mean, you could go to Jesse Chavez for some innings, although that would be I love Jesse Chavez, but I hold my breath when he comes in. His underlying numbers have been awful for a couple of months now. There's Chavez. Dylan Lee can go multiple innings. He only threw 2 pitches today.
Yeah.
That's something to consider. I mean, World Series starter.
I was going to say, if you didn't, World Series starter Dylan Lee has done it before.
Yeah.
While we're here, again, they have to make some decisions about the roster and who they're going to carry independent of this. So, like, we don't have to name all of it because it'll take forever, but there's only like 7 or 8 total locks to be on the staff out of 13. And it's like, okay, yeah, you probably carry at least one of these fringe starters. You probably carry Grant Holmes because he'll probably be able to go by game 2 or 3, and they like him as they should. He's been pitching well this year. I don't know if you can carry Jesse and Luke, like, with 13 guys available. Maybe they can. I'm just missing something. I think they seem to trust Daysbel Hernandez more than those guys. He's been pitching in high leverage situations. I mean, when's the last time that Chavez or Luke threw a meaningful inning?
I actually looked this up. Luke Jackson pitched Oh man, it's away from me. I think a week ago, but like basically over the last 2 weeks, I think Luke Jackson has thrown like 1 1/3 innings or something like that.
Which is appropriate, but that also means that you probably shouldn't be carrying that kind of playoff roster.
Right. And, I think they will carry Jesse Chavez for a couple reasons. He does have like a rubber arm. So that let's assume the absolute worst. The Braves are losing 8-0 in the second inning tomorrow. You could call in Jesse Chavez and he could eat it for 4 innings. I mean, he can.
Yep.
That's what he does at this point in his career. He's probably retiring the day after the Braves are eliminated, whether that's 3 days from now or 3 weeks from now or a month and a half from now. So, Jesse Chavez will go out there and throw the baseball. I think you carry him. Obviously on the left side, you have Dylan Lee, you have Aaron Bummer, you have you feel good about Raisel Iglesias and Joe Jimenez other than game 1 today. We should probably quickly talk about Pierce Johnson, Brad.
You and I did it the other day, and I felt bad because we kind of signaled it, but it's been bad for like 2 months, and he was awesome before that, and of course today he had the meltdown that we won't talk about. And look, he wasn't alone. Obviously, the 2 guys who have been unquestionably elite. I saw some Joe Jimenez slander on Twitter today. Relax, he's been great this year. He was bad today. Come on, what are we talking about? But Pierce Johnson has been bad for a while, and that's unfortunate. I think that they clearly still trust him on some level. He's been pitching high leverage innings. There was a debate that we won't have now about whether Dylan Lee should have stayed in the game, and I thought he probably should have. But when they went to Pierce today, but it's a question mark. I still think I trust him more than Jesse and Luke. So,
I do too. He just,
I think we agree that Dylan Lee is a guy that I would have higher on my pecking order in a vacuum than Pierce Johnson. But that's maybe the only switch that I would make that Snit doesn't seem to always want to make. I think Snit doesn't trust Lee as much as we do. But other than that,
And at the risk of turning this into a 2-hour podcast, there's some real roster decisions to be made because of the state of the pitching. On offense, it's pretty straightforward. There might be one spot up for grabs, but
do you want to know what it is? Let's just talk about it now for 2 seconds.
Yeah, I was going to say
it's basically the outfield. There's one outfield spot that they have to cut. It's between Duvall, Kelnick, and Eli White, and I think it's going to be Duvall. That's my guess.
Yeah, I think
because, and we love Adam, but utility wise, like he doesn't give you anything that nobody else gives you. That's my thought.
Yes, and he doesn't. You're right. He doesn't really give you speed. Defensively, he's worse than Kelnick. On the base pass, he's slower than White. Offensively,
and he's a righty.
Yeah,
so you kind of have that already. That's the only. I won't name all the players, but if you have to carry 13 position players, and they have 14, and basically it's one of those because you have to carry Witt for backup infielder. That's an easy choice. The 2 catchers. All the starters, including Laureano, and then that just leaves you with those 3 guys for 2 spots. It wouldn't stun me if they went Kelnick, I guess, off the roster, but I think it's going to be Duvall.
Yeah, and Kelnick has the added benefit of being a lefty, and
that's
good for Kelnick. We tried not to talk too much about game 1, but Kelnick has been riding the bench for a solid 2 weeks now. Basically hasn't played. I think the broadcast said he has like 1 plate appearance the last 14 games or something crazy like that. Kelnick came in and got a big hit today to keep the 8th inning rally going. So I think Kelnick brings enough. He's versatile. He can cover every outfield spot. He has a little bit of power. It's been a disappointing year overall for Kelnick, but I think he gives you just enough, and he's left-handed. In case you want to take down Ramon Laureano or you want to pinch hit for Soler or whatever the situation might be. So I think that's really the only question offensively. But on the pitching side, there are some legitimate questions, especially because we just don't know who is going to be available, whether in a starting capacity or a bullpen capacity. And like you mentioned earlier, do they want to potentially have Charlie Morton throw an inning out of the bullpen? They might have to. Out of just pure necessity, depending on how the next couple of days go.
Yeah, so as always, there are questions that we can't answer with the same information the Braves have. One of those is the capability of Charlie and even Spencer to give you to pitch in non-starting roles, because neither one of those guys can pitch on full rest in this series as a starter. That's the reality of today. So that's a question we can't answer. We don't know who they're going to call up. I do think we expect them to call up, even if those guys don't start the game, quote unquote. Would it shock you if they did not call up one of the starting level arms from Gwinnett just for bulk? Because it would shock me if they didn't do that. If Sale's out, obviously. If Sale's out, every caveat.
Sure. Yeah, I would agree. I think you have to probably call up one of Anderson, Smith-Shaver, Elder. I don't think there's a world where they would go to Hurston Waldrop, but
I mean, maybe just because of the arm, but I think he's definitely fourth. Maybe we'll be wrong about that. I think he's fourth on that list. Right now.
No, I would agree. So I think you do have to call up one of those three young arms. You presumably have the space in the pitching staff of your 13, and there's a chance. I mean, one of those three names we just listed might be your game one starter, even if they are not expected to go 90 pitches in 7 innings.
Yeah.
I think you just throw them out there and you see where the game is at.
Yeah, I might, and we don't spend time on this, but I might go with Dylan Lee as the opener, and then have one of those guys behind him versus starting them. But maybe that's a comfort thing. I don't know. We're all guessing, and man, I wish we had more time, more information to talk about this stuff, but we just don't. So that's, in short, the plan. Again, Max Fried in game 2 will be lined up in full rest. That's the easy one to plug in. Game 3 would be Ronaldo on full rest. If you take into account that today was his throw day, he would be on regular rest in game 3. So that presumably will be the plan for game 3. So after game 1, I mean, the upside is, Scott, if they could somehow steal game 1, it looks really good. Yeah. But if you lose game 1, obviously the vibes are bad. You're underdogs even more, but there's a path to winning the series if you lose game 1. So I don't know about you. We can start wrapping up a little bit, but this is a Padres team that we talked about being great earlier, and they really are. They don't. One thing we should at least talk about, they don't strike out. It's a weird profile, but they led the majors this year in strikeout rate on offense. They don't strike out. Now, they don't walk either. So that combination of no walks and no strikeouts, they led the league in hits this year. This is kind of an old school profile. Not a lot of walks, not a lot of strikeouts, a lot of hits, a lot of singles. Weird profile. But they also have a platoon split. They're good against righties, which is not great for the Braves, but maybe Max Fried. Max Fried, game 2. Max Fried would be good. So, I mean, we should say that. And also, do you have an opinion on their pitching staff going with Michael King in game 1? We should at least talk about game 1 more than game 2 and game 3. But game 1 is coming Tuesday, and they're not throwing Dylan Cease, which I know surprised you and me because we prepped for Dylan Cease, and then we got the curveball from the Padres. And by the way, it's Michael King instead.
Yeah, and if the name Michael King is not familiar, he was very good for the Padres this season.
Yep.
He was not as good as Dylan Cease, who just mowed the Braves down in his most recent start against them in July, had 11 strikeouts. I think he had a no-hitter for a good chunk of that game. So I texted a buddy of mine who's a Padres fan, and his thinking was this. The Padres know that, I mean, they're not oblivious to what's currently going on with the Braves and the state of Atlanta's rotation. So the Padres are effectively starting their number 2 in Michael King in game 1. Game 2 is, at least right now, supposed to be Joe Musgrove, and game 3 is Dylan Cease. And Cease is going to finish top 5 in Cy Young voting. He was terrific. Yep. He was a player over the winter we talked about wanting the Braves to try to go get. I think the Padres' thinking is because the Braves are so shorthanded and having to fly across the country and everything going on, they're going to try to win game 1 without using their very best arm in Dylan Cease. And then you set it up like this. Game 2, let's say San Diego wins, then you give the ball to Joe Musgrove, who's very good himself. And if Atlanta would win game 1, then I think the Padres would give the ball to Dylan Cease in what suddenly becomes an elimination game for them.
Yeah.
And if you're San Diego and you win the series in 2 games, then you have Dylan Cease ready to go, extra rest, game 1 against the Dodgers a couple of days later. So in some ways, the Padres are kind of doing what the Braves were doing, just going maybe not big braining it or galaxy braining it, but they are taking a bit of a risk by not pitching their very best pitcher in game 1. But I also kind of understand the logic behind it. And frankly, I think it's probably the right decision for San Diego, knowing everything that we know.
Yeah, that's a great explanation of what it's going to be. And just so you know, on Michael King, his changeup is his huge weapon. It has elite numbers on it. Like that's something to keep an eye on for Tuesday. He's really been good at avoiding hard contact. His like off speed Statcast data is like literally 99th percentile. So he's not a big power guy, but his off speed stuff is apparently disgusting. So that's the scouting report in mini form on Tuesday. But look, a guy that is obviously not unhittable. He's not an uber ace guy. Like he's good, but he's not unhittable. We'll see how that goes. Obviously, advantage San Diego pitching wise. Unless Chris Sale is miraculously healed, we could be objective and say the pitching advantage of game one is the Padres. But anything can happen. It's one baseball game. Anything else you want to hit on with regard to San Diego? Because like they have a good bullpen. I actually read, I believe it was the Athletics preview of the series, and just speaking as a sports writer, this is bad for sports writers. It's like you can't preview stuff that you don't know about until right before. It's really hard. But I believe it was Eno Saris wrote that he thinks the Padres pitching staff is the best in the playoffs.
Wow.
Now, I had an eyebrow raise at that, but it might be true if Chris Sale is not pitching. Because I would argue the Braves are the best pitching staff in the playoffs. But if Chris Sale doesn't exist, then that would not be the case. But that's just a statement. I'm not saying he's right or wrong. But for a respected national writer to be like, best staff in the playoffs, Padre, that's a pretty notable thing. And I think the way he framed it was basically their starters that they will have to use in the playoffs and their like best 4 or 5 bullpen arms. That combination of like 9 guys is really good. And I think he's right about that.
Yeah, right. In the playoffs, I mean, I know people know this, but it's not what is the best 26-man roster.
Yep.
It's what's the best 8 to 10-man pitching staff, and obviously you want your whole lineup firing, but we've seen just a couple of players can single-handedly carry a team. I mean, we saw it firsthand with Soler and Rosario and Duvall and Jock. I mean, you're right, like players step up in the postseason who you maybe don't expect. But no, I mean, the Padres are a really solid ball club. We mentioned the record they have since the All-Star break. They've been very, very good. It's a team that's been to the playoffs the past couple of years. And, they're a dangerous team. I mean, I'd be curious. I don't know, Brad, you're more keyed into the odds and futures than I am. But without knowing, I would assume the Padres have pretty decent World Series odds for being the 4 seed in the National League. This is a dangerous team. But honestly, across the board, I think all 6 playoff teams are quite good in the National League. The American League is not that. I really don't. I kind of think the Yankees are going to finally get there again to the World Series in the American League because I just don't see a lot of resistance on that end. But let me say this. I think any of the 6 teams in the National League could make the World Series, and it would not be like some mega shocker. Maybe not the Mets. I don't know if the Mets have the top end pitching to get them there. I would definitely have New York 6 on the list. But if you're telling me the Mets with a really good lineup and a pretty good bullpen and they just get hot for a couple weeks, I could see any of the 6 National League teams getting there. I could see Milwaukee doing it. I could see LA. I could see Philly. And I could see the Braves. I do think they need Chris Sale healthy if they're going to go all the way. They don't necessarily have to have Sale healthy for a best of 3 because stuff happens in a best of 3. But the National League has very good teams across the board, and it should be a fantastic playoff regardless of how far the Braves ultimately go.
We totally agree there. And to your point, the Padres are actually the 3rd favorite in the betting market in the National League behind the Dodgers and Phillies. Obviously, Dodgers and Phillies built-in advantages. They have to buy all those things, but the Padres are considered to be the team most likely to win the National League that is playing in the wild card round. So that says something.
And I would guess that if San Diego advances, their odds would be pretty similar to LA and Philadelphia because it is it's a good team. Now, don't mistake us. We're not saying the Braves are drawing dead and they have no chance.
No, this is not even like the Dodgers. We've been talking this about Braves baseball for a long time. There were some Dodgers teams that I thought were like prohibitive favorites at times. This is not that. They're not that good. They're not that level of team. There was no juggernaut team this year, which is you said that earlier beautifully. Like there's not, and Tim Kirchner said it too. I know you said that, but there's not a juggernaut this year on either side. But they're good, and it's a nice test for the Braves. We could do the thing that I know people have been talking about of vibes and thing. We've kind of run the whole gamut here, but in the end, we'll wrap it up and just say, yeah, they might be underdogs. situation's tough. We could be doomsdayers and say, man, another pitching calamity right on the eve of the playoffs. We didn't talk about that on this podcast, Scott, but like the synergy of the last couple of years in a bad way of just like the rotation falling apart at the absolute worst time. It's actually uncanny. It blows my mind that the timing of it every year right now with the Braves. But to avoid that doomsday realm, like they're still alive here. And there's no reason to believe the Braves can't make a run. Well, and on that positive note, I would say like optimism is sometimes hard to find, but it sets up. If they lose game one, yeah, like it's going to lessen their odds. But you have a stopper level guy in game two, Max Fried, who just threw a freaking gem the other day
all-timer
in a huge spot.
Yeah.
Like there's life here for the Braves. We'll see how long it lasts. Maybe we'll come on in 2 days and it'll be over. That will not be great for anybody involved. But we also could come on 2 days and they could be advanced in the NLDS in a 2-game mini sweep. So keep the faith if you want to. I think the biggest thing was where we started this podcast. The Braves got in the playoffs. We previewed the series, but the Braves got in the playoffs, and it's a fresh start for everybody.
That's right. Yeah, I thought Matt Olson said it well in the postgame. Everybody is 0-0 when October rolls around. And sure, maybe the betting markets, the computers, whoever it might be, I'm sure when you see the pundits across the board at ESPN make their predictions, if I can talk, it's going to be San Diego. I really think that. Maybe a person or two will pick the Braves. But, the Braves are underdogs, but that doesn't mean anything. Sure. In a perfect world, the Braves would be this mega favorite and they'd be playing some crappy 6 seed who just rolled into the playoffs on the final day, but that didn't happen. But especially with game one, knowing that you're going to be probably the biggest underdog of the series because of the current situation with the pitching staff, if the Braves can somehow steal game one, like game on, right? Like that, then it's really like an entirely different feeling. It's going to be difficult because of how everything is setting up. But again, man, baseball, the best team does not always win. I think it's fair to say objectively that this is not the best Braves team that we have seen over the past 7 years. With all the injuries, it's probably the worst. But October baseball is a funny thing. The Braves have had the best roster in baseball the last 2 years, and they have won 2 collective playoff games because of it. Who knows? Maybe this is going to be some 2021 vibes and they get hot for a couple weeks and go on a run. Let's hope so. But either way, we'll be here. We'll be tuning in. We'll be doing our daily podcast, which we do come playoff time. And let's hope it's a lot of fun and the Braves have a lot of baseball ahead of them.
You said it perfectly there. The last time we were talking about the Braves not having their best roster was when they won the World Series. So doesn't mean it's going to happen again, but playoff baseball is a different animal. And your team quality certainly helps you, but it is not always indicative of who wins every series in baseball. That's always the case when it comes to this time of year. I mean, even when the best team does win, usually the other side of the bracket is like total carnage or whatever. Like rarely is it just like the top seed advancing on all sides. It's just not what happens at baseball, and there's a reason for that. All right, Scott, we've done 50 minutes without even going deep into Monday because you and I are sickos. We should also plug one more time. If you want to relive even more of Monday's games and the madness, we recommend listening to our colleagues, Stephen Tolbert and Sean Coleman, who did a good job reacting in quick time to that. That's a must listen. I already heard it as I was trying to edit and post it and all that stuff, but they did a great job. Listen to that episode in addition to this one. And then as Scott said, we'll be here pretty much every single day until they're done playing, if not every single day until they're done playing, and hopefully beyond that. So, Scott, anything to plug on the way out, or should we just get out of here on a Monday evening?
Let's get out of here. It was a very taxing day. It was a lot of baseball. But hey, the Braves are in the playoffs. At the end of the day, even if game one was infuriating and took 5 years off all of our lives, even if there was all kinds of drama between the games with Chris Sale and then afterwards and all that, yes, it was a very long, taxing day, but the Braves are in the playoffs, and let's hope this team has a magic run left in them. It would be a pretty special way to wrap up a year where so many things have kind of gone against them. And who knows, maybe they'll rally around that and win a couple of games. And that starts Tuesday night with the Padres.
That's right. So the schedule is as follows. Tuesday, 8:38 p.m. Eastern time, first pitch on ESPN for game one. Wednesday, same time, 8:38 p.m. Eastern time for game two. It's ESPN2. And then if necessary, Thursday, game three at 7:08 p.m. Eastern on ESPN. So stay tuned for that. And then after those games, we'll be here in some combination of the four of us talking about whatever transpires. So please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Follow Scott on Twitter at Scott:55. Follow me if you'd like to at BT Rowland. Follow our show on social media at Hammer Territory on Twitter / Instagram, Facebook, all those places. And once again, please subscribe to the show, Apple, Spotify, Overcast, Amazon Music. We're also on YouTube where you can like the video and subscribe on that platform too. Thanks to everybody for the support. It's been really, really fun the last couple of weeks as people are getting back on board even more and more, and we definitely appreciate it. Let's keep it rolling. Tell your friends, and we'll see you all after game one.